Hi everyone, Meethany Choptano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Jack White album, Fear of the Dawn. This is a brand new LP from singer, songwriter, guitarist, Third Man Records founder, vinyl enthusiast, Jack White. His fourth full-length LP since putting more of a focus on his solo career. In fact, it's now been about 10 years since he released his album Blunderbuss, which was a decent LP. It almost seemed like a streamlined version of the blues rock, garage revivalism, and singer-songwriter cuts that Jack had built his career on up until that point. It was sort of predictable in that sense, but Jack could have easily continued down this path for the next 2 to 3 decades, feeding his audience these records they kind of know they're gonna like. And given all the work he's put into his crossovers over the years, the White Stripes, his own label, he's kind of earned that right, which is why it was so interesting to see him throw all caution to the wind on 2018's Boarding House Reach. The onslaught of zany vocal work, electronics, jazz, as well as experimental art rock jams, it made this thing a bit of a shock to listen to at first, even for somebody who had been wanting Jack to switch things up pretty desperately for a while. There were even some longtime fans that were kind of repulsed by the direction this album went in, but with years to digest it at this point. In a lot of respects, Boarding House Reach to me sounds like many other Jack White projects. I mean, the blues rock and the garage rock and everything else is still there at the core of much of what he did here. He just got way more wild with it, and ultimately I think that was a great thing. And personally, I enjoyed the record so much, part of me was worried that it would just be a fluke in Jack's discography. But Fear of the Dawn, I think, proves that Mr. White is still very much past the point of giving a fuck right now. Which is great because honestly, I really had no idea what to expect given some of the teasers we were hearing prior to its release. First, there was Taking Me Back, which almost felt like a bit of a regression with the songwriting, drums, and riffs just being so direct, but also so mind-blowingly loud. There is a rawness to it as well that reminds me of like the first White Stripes album. And while I didn't exactly love the track at first, it has grown on me quite a bit since. Plus, I love how in the record the song directly segues into the title track. And we also have Heidi Ho, featuring the legendary Q-Tip of A Tribe Called Quest, which objectively I think is one of the strangest things that Jack has ever recorded in his entire career. The whole thing kicks off with this really dramatic Cab Calloway sample. Then we get a bunch of like mixed fidelity, funky, rap rock fusions, an acoustic break that builds from there into a final moment where the drums are going hard, the guitars are going hard, and we're getting a lot of really weird vocal ad-libs. On the surface, the whole track sounds like pure nonsense, but the more I listen to it, the more it seems like the whole thing is about a vibe and energy, a mindset, with Q-Tip rapping about Heidi Ho being a Calloway or Cab Calloway vibe, making mention also of being on a highest plane of some sort. It seems like the track is just very much about letting go of inhibitions, being yourself, and given the sound of what is happening here, Q-Tip and Jack White have definitely given themselves permission to do exactly that. So yeah, based on these tracks as a whole, really did not know what to expect from the entirety of this record, but I can say now that I've finished the entire thing, I'm really happy that Jack, like with Boarding House Reach, is continuing to keep things interesting and versatile for the fans. But now he's executing that in a series of different ways. Like the first 3 tracks that kick off the entire record, Taking Me Back, the title track, also The White Raven. These are easily some of the most ferocious songs and performances that Jack has laid to tape in years. They even make the song Corporation from his last LP sound like easy listening. And again, I wasn't even crazy about Taking Me Back at first, but the song's explosivity and how colorful and whacked out the solo passages are, it's too good. Then the title track it morphs into is just a pounding riff fest. More wild guitar embellishments and distortion that honestly puts some heavy metal records to shame. And then on The White Raven, the distorted riffs on this one don't even sound like guitar half the time. Is this guitar? I'm not really sure what pedals or production trickery Jack is relying on to generate the sounds he is on this track, track, but each section of the song sounds like it's hinged on some different kind of digital noise. There is even a point where a certain riff sounds like a dubstep wobble, another like a Casio keyboard being fed through a Boss heavy metal distortion pedal. Then from there we break into the very weird Heidi-Ho, which I'm still a little on the fence with. There is also Eosophobia, which is a fear of dawn or daylight, which makes sense given the record's title track. And this track sees Jack casually transitioning into some rock and dub reggae fusion that slowly shifts into more of a hard rock style, a psych rock style, until it essentially sounds like Ty Segall surfing through a toilet bowl full of acid. I can't say I love it, but I do think it is intriguing, and Jack certainly thought enough of it to do a reprise of this track in the second half of the record, where he essentially extends some of the final guitar parts out into a pretty experimental jam. Into the Twilight sounds like some bizarro 80s synth funk, with every instrumental element of it being as harsh and as neon colored as possible. The buzzing guitar lines, the warm bass, the vocal harmonies of "Into the Twilight," plus the snare sounds like it was recorded in the tiniest bathroom. But genuinely, I am pretty surprised at how fun and funky this track came out, despite it being so harsh and despite everything about it instrumentally and production-wise just being so chaotic. Keeping with the album's themes of light and change and time shifting and sun going up, going down, we have the Dusk Interlude. Now, the second half of the LP from here is, in many respects, just as wild as the first. Jack is really not letting those ballads and those sentimental moments creep in. There's What's the Trick, which has some huge riffs, huge drums, vocally Jack just ranting over this instrumental madly in between what sounds like recordings of like a motorcycle running. There are some standout lines lyrically here and there, but the song overall does feel a little one note despite it being such an intense performance. I much prefer the melodic colors laced into the track that was then, this is now. The odd vocal harmonies and warped toy organ embellishments add a lot of charming color to the track's buzzing guitars and heavy drums that are just slathered with ambient noise. The track is catchy, it's focused, and it's just loaded with pure chaos energy. But on Morning, Noon, and Night, Jack does become a bit of a softie. Yeah, the instrumental may have these thumping drum and bass grooves that are laced with this like odd little organ loop, but essentially the song itself is about stealing time to be with someone who you have some strong feelings for. Some cute wordplay about stealing that time being a crime, and how at this point in his life, Jack doesn't have a whole lot of time to waste, which I think is a pretty cute song to record and drop around a time that you have just recently been engaged and married. Then the closing track, Shedding My Velvet, becomes an interesting statement of intent and self for the record, I think. Not my favorite tune here by a long shot, but I still do feel very compelled by the mentions of, again, Jack shedding this velvet and that being the real him. He's not as bad as he was, but he's not as good as he wants to be. But yeah, the track does have some interesting parting words with Jack saying, "Better to illuminate than to shine. You say this all the time, and you're right." And I agree. Shining as a concept is something that is very short-lived, it's self-important, doesn't really amount to much in the grander scheme of things, but illuminating, that is helping, that is lending perspective. But yeah, overall I thought this was a pretty good record from Jack. Lots of highlights on it. I thought the light and change and shift and progression concepts expressed through fear of dawn and so on and so forth was interesting. Lots of crazy, insane production, absolutely just wild guitars. And even though there were a handful of tracks I was very on the fence with or didn't care for too much, I still find it very encouraging to hear Jack at this point in his career staying very creative, giving listeners something that's a bit of a challenge, and giving listeners something that is frankly exciting and taking some risks and pushing some boundaries here and there. Feeling a decent 2 strong 7 on this record. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head, it's another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Jack White, forever.